Hello and welcome back. With our server side, or our admin GUI, sort of blueprinted out with its functions and classes, let's do the same thing now for our client. So I'm going to come over to our client side here. And again, we are not going to use any global variables here for accessing our socket. Instead, we'll make a connection class and we'll have the socket and its information stored inside of the connection class. So I'm going to scroll down here and we will, where we are defining our functions, I will quickly say class connection, and we'll say a class to store a connection, and we'll say a client socket and pertinent information. All right, perfect. So again, we're going to have an initialization method. We'll just write its signature out for right now. So I'll say def underscore underscore init underscore underscore, and we always have to pass the self parameter here, and then we'll just say pass. Now, if we think about it, we've got like our encoder and our byte size here as constants. These definitely seem like something that are going to be pertinent information for our client socket. So I'm probably going to get rid of these, and eventually what we'll do is we'll write them in and have them be attributes of our connection class. So I can just get rid of that right there. I think that that should be fine. Okay, so now that we have that, let's write out our function signatures for this class. So let's look at them. So we're going to need our connect function. We're going to have to connect to our server, but now we're going to have to pass in our connection object, because the connection object is going to hold the socket that we are going to use to make the connection. So I'll pass in a connection object here, and we'll say pass. Let's keep working here. We're going to need to disconnect next. So I'm going to move my disconnect. You know what? Why don't I just... We'll clear these out. Let's clear these out, because you know what? We're probably going to have to adapt these a bit to refactor. So I'm just going to delete these out, and let's write these starting fresh. So we've got our connect method. Next, our connect function. Our next function will be able to disconnect from the server. So we'll say def disconnect, and we'll pass in our connection object, and we'll just simply say disconnect the client from the server, and we'll pass. Let's start the connection. So we'll officially start a connection by like updating our GUI. So if you think about it, if we run this, oh, what was not defined? Send message is not defined. Oh, because we still have all of our buttons linked together. Yeah, that's okay. We'll take care of that in a second. So if you think about it, though, like when we start, a bunch of our buttons are going to be disabled, and then when we start our connection, we want to change the GUI layout. We want to activate certain buttons in fields and then disable other buttons in fields. So we're going to have some functions that are going to help us handle that. So we'll say def GUI start, and that won't take anything. And so we'll say officially start connection by updating GUI. So this will like activate our buttons for us, and we'll just pass here. And then let's do something similar. We'll say def GUI end. So we'll end our connection by like disabling a bunch of buttons. So we'll say officially end connection by updating GUI, and we'll pass. Okay, perfect. So now we're also going to be able, if we think about it, we're sending messages, and they're not just going to be strings here, but rather they're going to be what we're calling message packets that hold a lot of information. And these are going to be dictionaries that we use, and then we serialize with the help of Json. So we're going to say def, we got to be able to create those packets. So okay, create message. And in here, what is each packet going to hold? It's going to hold a flag specifying what type of message it is, whether it's a name or an exit flag or a primary message flag. We'll pass in the user's name. We'll pass in the message as a string, and then the color that the message should appear within the chat window. And we'll say here this is going to return a message packet to be sent. So we're prepping the message here. All right, we'll just pass. We should also process a message. So when a message packet comes in from the server, we have to process it to try to determine what we need to do. So we'll say def process message. We'll take in our connection, so we have access to our socket, and then we'll also take in a message JSON. And this will update the client based on message packet flag. So what type of flag is coming in, right? Is it a name flag? That means the server wants our name. Is it an exit flag? That means the server is going to get ready to quit. Is it a kick flag? We've been kicked, that type of thing. All right, perfect. And so let's see, what else do we got to do? Well, of course, the client needs to be able to send messages and receive messages. So we'll say def send message. And we'll need access to our connection object, which is going to hold our socket. So we'll say send a message to the server, pass, and then def receive message. And we'll make a connection object here. And we will receive a message from the server. And we will simply pass. Okay, perfect. I think this looks really good. One of the things we should do, though, is, if I ran this, I got an error because I have all of... Oh, I don't have an error now. Well, it's probably because I had some buttons linked previously to functions that I got rid of. We'll adapt that, I think, in the future. But for right now, I'm just going to leave. We still have a connect function. We still have a disconnect function, so that works pretty good. Let's look at some of our other buttons. Nothing there. The output frame, there's no buttons. The input frame, we got a send button. And we still have a send message function. So I actually think our buttons are okay. So this looks pretty great. So now if we look, our server is blueprinted out. We have the GUI made up, and our client is blueprinted out with all of its functions and what it needs to be, and we have that kind of printed out. So if we look, here are what we have in terms of our GUIs. I think this looks great, and I think we have a really solid foundation to begin writing our functions and adding the functionality to see this kind of like chat room application come to life. So I will see you in our next video. Hello and welcome back. With our layout and blueprints of our functions completed, let's start by writing some of our server functionality. So I'm going to start here over in my server.py file, and let's start with our connection class right here near the top. So we said we're not going to use global variables to essentially pass our server socket into our various functions so we can kind of work with that socket, but rather we'll create a connection class or a connection object and have this socket be one of the attributes of that connection object, and then we'll just pass the connection object into our functions. So inside of here, we'll work with our an init method, and we will just simply set some attributes here of our connection class. So we're going to need an IP address of where we want to create our connection, and so we'll call this self.host_IP. And we'll use the socket module to get our local IP address. So get host by name, and in here socket.getHostName. Perfect. If I spell name right. Okay, wonderful. Next, let's get an encoder. You might say, oh, we probably need a port address, but if you remember, we're going to get the port address from an entry field eventually. So the person running this server should be allowed to enter in whatever port they want, and when they click Start Server, then we'll grab that port address and set it as an attribute. So let's set an encoder, a default encoder, and we'll set that to be UTF-8. And let's set a byte size, a maximum byte size for our data stream. And we'll just pick an arbitrary value of 1024 again. We're not too worried about the size here yet. And now let's add a couple of lists that'll help us keep track of who is in our chat and who we do not want to be in our chat. So we'll do self.client socket. Client sockets is a blank list. That'll be all of the current sockets connected to the server. Then we'll do self.client IPs. That'll be a list of all of the IP addresses of those clients. And then lastly, we'll do self.banned IPs. And this will be a growing list of IP addresses that we want to ban from the server when it is running. perfect. With the connection class complete, let's go create a connection object right before we run the main loop of our root window. So right here, I'm going to add to this comment, I'll say create a connection object and run the root window's main loop. So we'll call this my connection, and it is going to be a connection object. So right before we open up our window, we're going to create this connection object, which is going to get our IP address, set our encoder, and do those other sorts of things. And now we can work with this connection object. So, we're going to add to this connection class as we run specific functions. So for example, when we start our server, we click that start button, we're going to add the port address that we want to run the server on to the connection object, and we'll create a server socket and add it as an attribute for this connection object. So we're going to probably let's start doing that right now. Now, if we want to run our server anytime, right, so we want to run our server anytime we click the Start Server button, we have to somehow link the functionality of the Start Server function and this button together. And we've sort of seen how to do this, except there's just one difference now. Our Start Server function takes in a parameter. So we have to see how we can link the button to this function using the command property when we are passing arguments. So I'm going to come to where is it? Here is my connection frame layout. Here is my start button, and we're going to link the start button to the Start Server function. So I'll say command is equal to, and typically we would just write the name of the function here. But what we have to use is a lambda. So we're going to use a lambda, which is essentially going to allow us to take in an argument to be passed at a later time when the button is actually pressed. So we're gonna the syntax here is command equals lambda colon the name of the function, so start server, and then inside of here we're gonna put in the argument. So we're gonna pass in the my connection object. Awesome. So now when we press our button at any point, we're going to call the Start Server function, and we're going to pass the connection object that we just created. So let's go look at that Start Server function. All right, so here is our Start Server function. And so let's look at how we might go about writing this function right now. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is get the port number that the admin wants to run the server on. So we can do that. We know we have an entry field for this, so we'll say get the port number to run the server on, and attach to the connection object, we'll say. Connection object. Okay, perfect. So my connection object, I'm calling, connection here inside of my function. So I'll say connection dot port. We'll set that as an attribute, and we'll do port entry dot get. We'll call the get method on our port entry widget that we had created. Now this is going to be a string, so I'm going to cast it to an integer because we saw that we need this to be an int for our port addresses. Okay, perfect. So next thing that we'll do is we'll create a server socket, and again we're going to store this on our connection object. So let's create our server socket now. If we want to start the server, we need a socket. So we'll say create server socket. So we'll do our connection object, and we'll give it a new attribute of a server socket, and it'll be a socket a, and in here we'll pass socket dot af underscore inet and socket.sock underscore stream. So it'll be IPv4 and TCP. And now let's bind it. So we'll say connection dot server socket dot bind. And where do we want to bind it? Well, we got to use a tuple. So we'll specify our address here. It's going to be the IP address is stored within our connection object. So it's going to be connection dot host IP, comma, and our port address is also stored within our connection object. We added that as an attribute right here, so we'll do connection dot port. Okay, and now we will just have the server socket begin listening for connection. So we'll do connection dot server socket listen. All right, excellent. So now that we have our server kind of essentially up and running, we should update our GUI. So we'll update our GUI here next. We'll just say update GUI. So here we'll clear any current chats that might be in the history list box. So like if there's an old chat running, we'll empty it out. And then to do that, to empty everything out, we are going to need to bring in the end keyword. So I'm going to come up here and from tkinter import, I'll just add end. All right, excellent. So we'll scroll down here and we'll say, okay, we will say our history list box dot delete. We'll start at the beginning, index 0, and we'll go all the way to the end because we have no idea how many, messages will be in that chat. And then we'll put a new message into that list box stating that the server is starting. So we'll give some visual, confirmation on the server end. So we'll do history list box dot insert, and we'll start at index 0, and we'll use an F string here. Server started on port, and then I'll give the port address. So we'll call our connection object, and we'll print its port attribute. All right, awesome. So that'll give us some visual confirmation here. Now what we'll do is we'll have to just reconfigure our buttons, right? So we'll have we have a bunch of buttons that I think are currently disabled, and we want to activate them or put them in the normal state. So I'm going to come up here, and from tkinter we have to bring in the normal keyword. And now we'll be able to do that. So let's scroll back down, and where we're updating our GUI in our start server function, we'll change some of our buttons. So we have an end button .config, and we'll say state is equal to normal. And I'm actually just going to copy this line and paste it a few times because we have a bunch of buttons that we just have to make normal. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's going to be enough. So our buttons, what do we have? We have an end button. Let's run this and look. We have our end button. We have a self-broadcast button is what we called that. We have our message button, our kick button, and our ban button. All of those things need to be activated. And then we also have to disable the start button. So we'll do that one afterwards. So let's name these. So I had end here. We'll call this self-broadcast button. The next one, I think we called it message button. The next one was kick button. And then the last one was ban button. And then we have to do one more thing. We just got to take our start button .config, and we'll take the state and make it disabled upon startup. Okay, awesome. Lastly, now that we have the server up and running and the GUI's updated, we also need to start a thread here that is going to begin listening for incoming connections. So I'm going to create a thread so that we're always listening for incoming connections. So we'll say create a thread to continuously listen for connections. All right, and inside of this thread, we'll call it connect thread, and our target function is going to be our connect client function. We have a function here that we're going to write called connect client, where we're going to connect incoming clients to our server. Now here, when we have to pass the connection object to our function, so we can do that using the args parameter. So we're going to say connect thread is equal to threading.thread, and now I have to specify my target function. My target function is connect client, and we need some arguments for this function, so we're going to do this by specifying args equals, and then inside of here we have to make it sort of like an iterable, so we have to specify the arguments as comma separated items. So I'll do connection, right? That's what we were calling it, connection with a comma right here. So that'll pass our connection object in. Okay, awesome. So the last thing that we'll have to do here now that we've created the thread is let's just start the thread. So we'll say connect thread.start. Okay, and I think this function is complete. Let's just run this and see how this is working. Okay, so if I type in a port address 12345 and I hit start server, server started on port 12345, and all of our buttons have switched, and now we have some active functionality here, and that button is disabled. So that looks great. Looks perfect. So with our server started, we should probably next work on letting clients connect. And so when our clients are connecting here, we're going to have some improved functionality within this chat room. Clients and the server are not just going to be sending strings. Rather, we said they're going to be sending like what we're calling message packets or dictionaries. And so these message packets are going to hold lots of information, such as a flag indicating what type of message it is. So the flags could be like an information flag, a message flag, a disconnect flag. They'll hold the client's name, the message that they want to send, and then the color of the message that they want to have their message appear. And so before we connect our clients and begin working on that, let's quickly write our function that's going to format, create, and return these message packets that we want to send. So I'm going to scroll down to our create message function right here, and inside of here let's write this function. So you can see we take in 4 arguments, and we simply want to create a dictionary from these 4 arguments, where each argument is going to be some kind of key value pair, and then we'll return the dictionary. So we'll call this dictionary message packet, and inside of here my first key will be flag, and the value will be the associated flag that we pass in. So whatever we pass in here as the flag, we'll have a key flag. And then my next key will be name, and its value will be whatever name we pass in. My next key will be message, and its flag or its value will be whatever message we pass in. And then lastly, I'll have a key color, and its value will be whatever color we pass in. So that will create our packet for us nicely here, and then we'll simply return that message packet. We'll return that dictionary, so then we can do things like send it to maybe like our broadcast function. Okay, great. So now that that's kind of out of the way, right? We've created our message packet. Let's work on connecting our clients to our server. So when we start our server, we're running a thread that's continuously listening continuously listening for incoming connections, and it's targeting the connect client function. So we got to go over and write this. Now we're calling this thread only once, okay? So we're going to call this thread once, which means I want to always be listening for clients connecting. So in my connect client function, I'm going to run this using an infinite while loop. So I'll say while true, always run this thread, and I'll use some try and except blocks to handle any kind of like error messages that are coming in. So the first thing that we're going to do, we'll say try, and we'll try to create a client's connection here. So we'll accept an incoming connection. So I'll say client socket, I'll get the socket that's trying to connect, and I'll do client address. I'll get the IP address that is trying to connect, and we'll say connection.server socket.accept. So that's how we're going to reference it, right? Where is the socket? The socket is stored in my connection object. So connection, there's the server socket, and we'll call its accept method. So now, the next thing that we should probably do is someone's trying to connect to our server. And so we'll look to see if the person that is trying to connect is in that list of banned IP addresses. Because if they are in the list of banned IP addresses, then we most certainly do not want them to be able to get in to our connection. So we'll have to put a little statement here. We'll say check to see if the IP of the client is banned. All right, so we'll say if client address, and now this address right here is a tuple, and the first part of that tuple is the IP address. The second part is, I think, the port address. So we're only going to look at the first index of the tuple here. So if client address 0 in, what do we call that list? It was on our connection object, and it was connection.banned IPs. So if it's in that list, then what do we want to do? Well, we are going to create a new message packet here, and that message packet is going to hold some specific information, and then we're going to try to send it to that client socket. So we're going to say message packet is equal to, and to create a message packet, we have a function that's going to do this. It's our create message function that we just wrote, and inside of here we need 4 arguments. We need a flag. My flag is going to be a disconnect flag. All right, so we'll use a disconnect flag to indicate that we are quitting or leaving or getting kicked out. The user, or our name, will be admin, and I'll say admin private. It'll be a private admin message. Then we need a message itself, so we'll say you have been banned, ... goodbye. And then lastly, we need a color, and I'll just use my default light green color for my admin messages that we have been using in our kind of like GUI layout. All right, perfect. So now I have this message, and that message is a dictionary. So if I want to send this to the client that just connected, I have to somehow encode it. And so we're going to use JSON to do that. So I'm going to call my message JSON now. And to turn this message packet essentially into a string. So really, where I say message JSON, I guess I could say message string, but I think it just helps me to call it message JSON. I'll call the JSON module .dumps, and I'll pass in the message packet. So now it's a string, so now I should be able to send it along and encode it. So I'm going to send that to the client. So I'll do client socket .send message JSON .encode. So now I have to encode that, and my encoder is stored within my connection object. So I'll do connection .encode. All right, perfect. Or connection .encoder. There we go, connection .encoder. And so now we've sent that message to the banned client that is trying to connect. We're saying, hey, you have been banned. Goodbye. This is a message coming from the admin. We're sending a disconnect flag, which is going to tell the client, maybe on their end, that they should close their socket. And we'll close the socket here. So we'll say close the client on our end as well. So we'll say client socket .close. Okay, perfect. So what if they're not in the banned IP addresses? Well, what do we want to do? So we'll say else. We will begin by sending a message packet. So we'll say send a message packet to receive client info. All right, so we're going to receive some client info here. So let's create a message packet. So we'll say message packet is equal to, we'll call the create message function. And inside of here, we're going to send an info flag this time. And we'll see how we're going to process all of these flags later on the client side. The name of the person sending this will be admin private. The message will just say, please send your name, something like that. And the color again will be light green. All right, perfect. Now let's turn this into a JSON, like a string, right? So that's a dictionary, and if we want to send it, we got to encode it. So we'll turn it into a string first. So I'll say message JSON is equal to JSON.dumps message packet, and now we'll send it along. So I'll do client socket.send message JSON, but I have to encode this. Thankfully, it's a string, so I can call .encode, and we'll pass in our encoder, which is stored in connection.encoder. Awesome. And so now we'll send a message packet saying like, hey, I see you want to connect. Send me your name. We should wait for a confirmation to be sent that verifies the connection. So we'll say here, wait for confirmation message to be sent, verifying the connection. All right, so we're going to wait to receive something now from our client. So I'm going to call this message JSON, right? What we're going to receive is a JSON object, or a JSON, a string object, a string representation of a dictionary. So client socket.receive, and we got to specify the byte size here, and that's stored in our connection object. So connection.byte size. And now that we have the message JSON, what do we have to do to the message? Well, that's a great question, right? I think what we're going to do is we eventually have a function here called process message, right? And so the process message function, it says it's going to update server information based on a message packet flag. And you can see it takes in a connection object, it takes in a message JSON, it takes in a client socket, and it also takes in a client address. And if you remember, I briefly said we're going to initialize this value. We said a default value is a tuple of 0, 0. We said client addresses are tuples. The first value is the IP address, and the second value is the port. So sometimes we'll have this to pass in, and other times we will not when we call process message. So that's why we're sending the default value there of just 0, 0. So once we get our message coming from the client, let's call that process message function. We haven't yet written it, but we will shortly. So we'll say process message, and then let's pass all of our information. So we'll pass the connection object, which is here in this function. We'll pass the message JSON that we just grabbed from the client. We'll pass in the client's socket that we got right here when we connected. And then we'll also pass in the client address, which we also got right here when we connected. Okay, perfect. So that's a nice if else. So we'll try all that, and then our else or our except block. So we'll just come back here. We'll line up if that doesn't work. So we'll just do except, and then here we'll just simply put a break statement. So our break will just end this while loop of listening for incoming connections, and we won't really allow anyone else to come in. Okay, so I'm going to just clean this up here for a second. Okay, I think this is a great place to stop. This video is getting a little long, and I like to keep them, under 20 minutes, and I think I just went over. But this is a good place to stop. We've got our server is on its way to getting some functionality here. We can start the server. We have a way to create some message packets, and we're beginning to listen for some incoming connections. So we will pick up working on the functionality here of the server in our next video. Hello, and welcome back. We left off in our last video expecting to receive a message from the client right here, right? So this is in our connect client method that we'll have running on the server side. We're always listening to accept for connections because this thread is always going to be running. And if we get something that someone that is not in our current banned list of IPs, so we're going to allow them to connect, we send them an info flag message packet, which says, hey, I see you're wanting to connect, send some information my way. And so we expect to receive that information right here. And so we said that when we receive that information and we get this message JSON, what do we have to do with it? Well, we're going to have to process the message. Depending on what type of flag we have in the message packet, we're going to have to do some different things. So why don't we head over and write this process message function right now. So I'm going to just scroll down right here to our process message. Perfect. So the first thing that we're going to do is we'll say that we kind of have to unpack the JSON, the message JSON that we've just sent in to access all of the information within the given message. So right now this is like a string object, right? So it's a string, and actually it's an encoded string, but thankfully for us, JSON will decode it and then turn it back into the dictionary object for us all in one step using the loads method. So I'm going to call this, instead of calling it message JSON, I'm going to call it back to being a message packet, and that's kind of just the naming convention I've chosen, right? A message packet is a dictionary, a message JSON is the string representation of that. So I'm going to call the JSON module, and I'll call JSON.loads, and in here I'll pass in the message JSON. And so this is going to, and I'll put a little comment here, I'll say decode and turn to dict in one step. Awesome. So now we have a dictionary. Let's kind of access the information that is in that dictionary. So I'm going to get the flag, and we'll get the flag by looking at our dictionary message packet, and we'll use the key flag to access the flag. And I'm going to do a similar thing for the name. So name is equal to message packet, and we'll access the name through the key name. We'll get the actual message itself, message packet, and we'll look at the message flag key, and then color is message underscore packet, and we'll look at the color key. Awesome. So now we have access to all of this information. We'll process our messages differently based on the flag that has been sent. So we'll use like an if, else if, else block here. And I'll write each condition, but then we'll just simply, pass for now. So we'll say if the flag is equal to info. So I'm using that as my information flag. So what do I want to do? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is if they send me back a message that has an info flag in it, that means they're sending me their information. We're going to add the new client information to our appropriate list. So I'll say add the new client information to the appropriate lists. Okay, so what lists? Well, if we look, I'll scroll up here. Our connection object has a couple of lists. If we were adding a new client, I want to add their socket to this list, and I want to add their IP address to this list. We will not add them to the banned IP list until they do something really bad, which might happen, hopefully. Hopefully not. So we'll come over here and we'll say, okay, through our connection object, which we've passed in right here, we'll do connection.client sockets. That's our list, and we'll append their current socket, which we have passed in when we process our message. So we'll say client socket. All right, and then we'll add the IP address. So we'll say connection.client IPs. That's that list that's going to hold all of the IP addresses, and we'll call the append method, and we'll pass in client address. But here we only want the IP address, and so that's going to be the first element within the tuple here. Now, if you look, the reason why we want to pass in a client address only when the flag is an info flag. Otherwise, if like the flag is a message flag or if the flag is a disconnect flag, we're not going to be worrying too much about the client address, and so at that point we'll just have an arbitrarily default value of 0, 0. So here's the only time we'll actually, I think, use that client address within this function. Okay, so now we've added that new material, or the new client, that new information to these lists. Let's broadcast that a new client is joining the chat. So we'll say broadcast the new client joining and update our GUI on the server end. So I'm going to create a message packet because I want to send information out to everybody. So we'll call create message. And in here, I need to pass in 4 pieces of information. So I'm going to pass in the flag. This is going to use a message flag. That's the flag we'll use to handle just normal messages. Who is it from? It's from the admin, but I'll say admin broadcast. All right, so that'll give a little bit of visual cues as to whether or not everybody gets the message or just you got the message. And then what's the message going to say? I'll use an F string here, and we'll say we'll get the name of the person. So they've sent their name over. Perfect. Has joined the server. 2, 3. Perfect. All right, so I think that looks good. And then we just need a color, and our color will just be the default light green. We'll say light green. Okay, awesome. So now that we have that message, let's turn it into a JSON object, because right now it is a dictionary. So we'll say message JSON is equal to json.dumps, and we'll pass in our packet that we just created, our dictionary. So now it's a string, and that means we can encode it. And so I'm going to now want to broadcast this message. So I'm going to call our broadcast message function. So see, it's right here. We haven't written it yet, but we're going to write it. So we'll do broadcast message, and in here I have to pass 2 objects. I have to pass a connection object. Okay, so I'll pass the connection that we kind of are sending from one function to an next here, so connection. And then I have to pass in a JSON object. So I'll say message JSON. I am going to say here, and maybe I'll add this as a comment down here, all JSON are encoded. So I'm going to make it so that anytime we call broadcast message, whatever we're sending into this function is already encoded. So I'll do message JSON, and then I'll encode it right here. Encode, and our encoder is found in our connection object, so connection.encoder. All right, perfect. So that will now send that message that we just created to our broadcast, which will hopefully get to all of our clients connected. There's a little bit more we want to do here in our conditional statement for an info flag. Let's update the server UI on our end. Oops. So we'll say update server UI. And so we have, if we think about a new client has just joined, and so if we scroll down here on our GUI, we have a client list box, which is going to keep track of all of the clients that have currently connected to our server. So let's update that client list box. So here we are. We'll say client list box.insert. And we want to insert, we'll insert at the end. So it'll be, sequentially, the last person that joined will be at the bottom. And then I will say I want to insert the client's name. So I'll use an F string here and I'll say name, colon, and we'll tack in their name that we got from our flag. I'm going to put a bunch of white space in here. I don't know. I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll do eight white spaces. Maybe it'll look good, maybe it won't. We'll see. And then I'll do IP, ADDR, IP address, space. And then in here, we'll put the client address that we got. So client address. And remember, I just want the IP address. I don't really care about the port number. So I'm going to do client address 0. Okay, awesome. So now we've updated the server UI. The last thing that we really need to do inside of here is we now need to start listening for incoming messages from the client that we just connected. So what we should do is we should probably have a thread so that we can constantly listen for incoming messages. Okay, awesome. So let's add that thread right now. So we'll say now that a client has been established, start a thread to receive messages. So for every client that we connect, we'll have their own thread where we're listening for incoming messages. So we'll say receive thread is equal to threading.thread. We need a target here. So what is our target going to be? Our target function, we have a receive message function right here that we can target. And if you look, the receive message function requires a connection object and a client socket. So we'll pass them in here as well. And I think we have access to both of those, right? We have a connection object right here and we have a client socket. So we can pass those in. So we'll say our target of this thread is the receive message function, and then we need to pass in our arguments. So we'll say args is equal to, we need our connection and we need our client socket, and then don't forget the comma at the end here. I think that does matter. You will get an error if you don't have that, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so with that thread defined, let's now just simply start the thread. So we'll say receive thread dot start. Okay, awesome. I think the if statement here is sort of all set up. This should work out pretty nicely. Why don't I quickly? So this is going to be our if statement. If the incoming message packet on the server end has an info flag, we'll do all of this good stuff. So what are some of our other flags going to be? Well, we're going to have a message flag. So I'll write an else if statement right here. I'll say elif flag is equal to message. And for right now, we'll just pass. We'll worry about that later. And we'll also have a disconnect flag for when we want to begin the exiting process of a client or a server. So I'll say elif flag is equal to disconnect. And for right now, I'll just pass, so that's nice. And then I'll have an else block here just to catch any errors. So we'll say catch for errors. And we'll just give some sort of visual cue. And we'll put this in our chat window. So our chat window, I think we called that chat, it was history, right? History frame. And so we have a history list box, which is going to show all of the chat history. We'll put something in the history list box. So we'll say history list box dot insert. At index 0, we'll say error processing message dot dot dot. Okay, perfect. So I think this should be all set. I'm not necessarily sure we can really test anything at this point, but I'll just run this just to make sure. So if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all right, ports started. But yeah, we can't really test it because nobody is connecting. So we're really stuck now waiting for our clients to be able to connect. So maybe we should go work on our client next here. So let me close this. Let me see where we're at for time. Okay, let's do one last thing here in our server before we end our video. In our process message function, we are checking to see if the flag was an info flag, and if it is, we're accepting the client, we're adding its information, and then you can see here we've created a new message packet to let everybody in the chat sort of know that this new person has joined, and then we're calling broadcast message. Why don't we write broadcast message right now? So if I scroll down here, here is our broadcast message function. Let's write this out. So we'll say broadcast. Well, actually, we don't even need to. We know what we're going to do here. We're going to send a message to all client sockets connected to the server, and all of our JSONs are already encoded. So we want to send to every connected client on our server. Luckily for us, our connection object has a list of all of the connected client sockets, and so we can just loop through that. So we'll say for client socket in our connection object dot client sockets. So there's that list. So this is the list of all connected client sockets on our server through our connection object, and we're going to loop through each individual client socket, and we'll just call that client socket, and we'll say, hey, let's send. And what do we want to send? We want to send our message JSON to each and every one of them, and that JSON's already encoded, so I don't have to worry about that right there. So I think that that's going to work out really nicely. So in this case, when someone joins our server, we're creating a message packet with a flagged message from our admin that says, I don't know, maybe it says Joe has joined the server, and then we'll broadcast that to every single client that's connected. And then when we get to working on the client, we'll have to figure out, okay, how does the client process messages? Well, based on the flag that we send, so if this is a message flag, we're going to do something like maybe have it appear in our chat window. So I think this is a good place to stop here on the server end. I'm just going to save this really quick. So we've got a lot of our import statements already up here. One of the things that I will have to add, though, we've got tkinter socket and threading, but I'm also going to have to import JSON, the JSON module here for this project. So we'll bring up our JSON module, and next, let's go work on our client side connection object. So we're going to work on our connection object right here. Again, we're not using global variables this time, but rather we're going to create a connection object, and we'll pass it into our function for all of our different functions for making some changes here. So the attributes we'll set to the connection object initially on this init method are the encoder. So we'll say self.encoder is equal to UTF-8, and then we'll set a byte size. So we'll say self.byte size is equal to 1024. The rest of the stuff we will set through our entry boxes in our GUI. But now that we have a connection object, why don't I scroll down and create one of these right before our root Windows main loop. So right here, I'm going to change my comment so it's a little bit more clear what we're doing. So I'll say create a connection object and run the root Windows main loop. So we'll call this connection object my connection. It'll be a connection object. And now we want, so let's see, let's run this. If we run this right now, I'll put in all of my information, and anytime I hit the connect button, that's when I want to, start my connection. And that's essentially when we will sort of create like our socket and connect it to the connection object. And so I think we have a function here on the client side called connect. So we want to link our start button to this connect function, but you can see here we need to take in an argument, a connection object. So if I scroll down, here is our connect button. You can see currently we had previously had this set we had already linked it to this function via the command property, but now we need an argument here as well. So in order to do this, I need to use a lambda in order to add that connection object. So I'm going to just change this to command equals lambda. And now in here we're going to target the connect function, but I can now pass in an argument. And so I'll say my connection. Perfect. So that's going to write, or it's going to pass that connection object that we just created to that connect function. So let's go write this connect function right now. So we'll come back up here. And perfect. So let's talk about what we need to do within this connect function. So the first thing that I'm going to do is when we connect to a new chat, I will clear out any information that might be in our chat window from like a previous chat. So I'll say clear any previous chats. All right, and so we have a list box here. I think that's keeping track of all of our chats. And on the client side, we really only have one list box. So I think I called it my list box. Yeah, for our output, I called it my list box. So we'll empty that out. All right, so here we are in our connect function again. So I'll say my list box dot delete, and we'll start at index 0, and we will go all the way to the end of the list box. Okay, next, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to get the required connection information from our input fields. So I'm going to say get required information for connection from input fields. 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 There we go. Third time's the charm. Okay, and I'm going to add it to our connection object. So, right, we have a connection object. We only set 2 attributes up here. Let's set some more attributes. So I'm going to do connection.name. What is your name? Well, we'll get it from our name entry. And we'll call the .get method on that. We want a target IP, so I'll do connection.target IP, and we'll call that on the IP entry .get. We'll need a port, so I'll do connection.port is equal to port entry.get, and I'll do connection.color is color.get. And so this is going to get for our connection, whenever we try to make a connection to the server, we're going to have our name stored here, the IP address we want to connect to, the port address we want to connect to, and then whatever color was set from our radio button, right? So if I clicked like I want to have orange, when I click connect, that will be stored in my connection object, which I can then pass to the server. Okay, perfect. So now that we have that here, let's use a try and except block to handle any errors of actually making our socket. So we'll say try, and I'll say create a client socket. So we'll do connection through our connection object. I will create a new socket. So connection.client socket, and we'll say socket.socket. And this will be socket.af_inet, socket.sock_stream. So that's going to create an IPv4 TCP socket, and we're going to call it client socket, and we're going to access it through our connection object. Next, let's connect. Let's try connecting our client socket. So we'll do connection.client_socket .connect. And in here, what do we want to connect? So it's a tuple. We're going to connect to our target IP and our target port, which are in our connection object. So connection.target IP. And then if you remember, the port, because we're getting it from an entry field, this is going to be a string. So right here, I'll just turn it into an integer, and I'll say connection.port. Okay, awesome. So that will try to connect, and hopefully it will work. And if it does work, what's going to happen? Well, on the server end, we know, if I just scroll down here, here it is. So under connect client, when we connect someone, if we accept them, we instantly send a message packet to the client with an information flag. So we need to receive that message packet. So that's the first thing that we're going to do here. We'll say receive an incoming message packet from the server. And so we'll call this message JSON. All right, and it is going to be through our connection object. We'll get our socket, so connection.client socket.receive. And in here we need to specify our maximum byte size, which is stored in our connection object, so connection.byte size. And now that we have that message, what do we have to do? Well, we have to process it, right? We have to see what is the flag, and depending on the flag, what behaviors we need. And we're going to have a function that's going to do that. See, we have this process message function that we will write similar to what we did on our server side. So let's call the process message function right here. So we'll say process message, and we'll pass in our connection object, and we'll pass in the message JSON that we just received. Awesome. So what do we want to do if for some reason that we're not able to make this connection, like maybe we've got some error, we have some bad information in our fields? We'll just put an except block, and we'll say let's give some visual feedback to that list box. So my list box dot insert, I'll put it up at the top, so index 0, and I'll say connection not established dot dot dot. Goodbye. All right. Awesome. So I think that this looks pretty good. So why don't we write our process message function right now? So we know we're going to be calling it here. So let's go down and we'll write that process message function right now. Okay, so the first thing that we'll do is we're going to do something really similar to what we did on the server. So we're going to get a message JSON, right? We need to turn it back into a dictionary and then kind of unpack that information so we have access to all of the key value pairs. So we'll put a comment here. We'll say update the chat history first by unpacking the JSON message. And this is going to be exactly like if I come over to my server, in my server's process message function, it's going to be exactly the same here. So these 5 lines I'm just going to copy. I'm going to come over to my client, and I will paste them in. All right, perfect. So remember, we got this message JSON. We're going to decode it and turn it back into a dictionary all in one step using the loads method, JSON loads method, and then we'll store all of our dictionary information in our variables here. So now, what do we want to do if that first flag that we receive is the info flag? All right, so if the flag is equal to an info flag, well, we'll say the server is asking for information to verify a connection. Let's send the info. Let's send that info. So we need to create another message packet. So we'll say message packet is equal to create message. And in here, we will send an info flag back to the server. And so the server sent us an info flag saying like, hey, you want to connect? Send me your name. And now we'll send an info flag back. What is our name going to be? Well, we're going to send connection.name. So our name is stored in the connection. We got it from an entry field. The message will say joins the server. And then the color will be whatever color the user had selected from our radio button, which we stored in our connection object. So we'll say connection.color. Awesome. So there is our nice little message packet. So now let's turn it into a string so we can encode it. So we'll say message JSON is equal to JSON.dumps message packet. And now let's send it. We'll send this to the server. So we'll say connection.client socket. So we'll access our socket through our connection object .send, and then we will send the message JSON. So message JSON, and we have to encode this string. So we'll call .encode, and our encoder is stored within our connection object. So connection.encoder. Okay, perfect. So now we've sent our flag, right? We've tried to connect to the server. The server sent us an info flag saying like, hey, I see you want to connect. Send me your name and some information. We'll just verify this connection. We send the name back over to them. So now we have successfully connected. So what we should do is we should enable all of our GUI buttons for our chat. So we'll say enable GUI for chat. And so we have a function that is going to do just that. Where is it? It's called GUI start. And so we'll write that momentarily. Let's just call it right now. So we'll say GUI start. So we'll call that. Why don't we go up and just write GUI start right now? I mean, we might as well just do it. We've called it right here. So I'll scroll up, and here is GUI start. So let me keep pass here for a second. Let's run this. What do we want to do on GUI start? Well, I think we want to disable the client name, client port number, host IP. We probably want to disable the connect buttons. I think we will want to disable every single radio button here, so we can't change our color. We want to activate the disconnect, and we want to activate the send button. So quite a bit we want to do, but it's not going to be too hard. We'll say connect button dot config. All right, and the state here, once we connect, we want to disable. So we'll say disabled the connect button. The disconnect button dot config, we want that to be equal to normal. The send button dot config, the state should be normal. We want to activate that. The name entry button, or name entry, not the button. So name entry dot config, we don't want to be able to change our name, so we'll say state is equal to disabled. The IP entry dot config should be disabled. The port entry, so port entry dot config should be disabled. And I think that's all of our buttons and entries. And the last things we need is all of our radio buttons. So we do have, if you remember, we scroll down here, we put all of our radio buttons in a nice list called color buttons. So we can just loop through that list and disable each and every button. So we'll come back up here to GUI start. And we'll say for button in color buttons, button.config, and then we'll say state is equal to disabled. All right, so that looks pretty good here for that function. So now we've started the GUI. That should load up. It should be nicely done. What's the last thing that we got to do here if everything is good and our connection is valid? Well, we should create a thread to continuously receive messages from the server. So we're going to, now that the connection is valid, we'll say create a thread to continuously receive messages from the server. So we'll call this receive thread, and we'll call the threading module, so threading.thread. Our target is going to be, I think we have a function called receive message. Yeah, we have a receive message function, and it needs to take in a connection object. So we got to make sure we pass our connection object that we have right here to that function. So our target is going to be receive message, and we need some arguments. So we'll say args are equal to, and we need an iterable here, so we'll say connection, and then we'll put a comma. Now that that thread is created, let's start the thread. So we'll say receive thread.start. And I think that's it for our if statement here. So if we get so we connect to the server is going to try to send us an info flag, packet back. We receive the packet and we're going to process it, right? So like we'll come back up here. When we try to connect to the server is initially going to accept the connection. All right, we come back over here. The server is going to initially accept the connection, and they're going to look to see if we're in the band IP list. If we're not, they're going to send us a message packet with an info flag, and then they're going to wait for confirmation from us. So we're, on our end, when we connect, we are going to make the connection, and we are going to receive an incoming message from the server, and we're going to process that message. If that message has an info flag, we're going to send an info flag back to the server with our name and a message saying we've joined the server, and we're going to send it back to that server. So let's go now to the server side. When the server gets that message and they process it, if the flag was an info flag, then they're going to add our client to their appropriate lists. They're going to broadcast to everybody that someone has just joined, and then they're going to begin listening for messages. So I think this is going to work out really nicely here for us. Everything is going to, I think, just kind of communicate really well here. So that's the if statement on the client side of if the flag is info. Let's just blueprint the rest of this out here. So we'll say elif the flag is equal to message. Message. We'll just pass for right now. Elif the flag is equal to disconnect, and we'll just pass for right now. And then else, this will just be like our catch for errors. We'll just say catch for errors, ... We'll add to our list box. So let's see. Our list box, I think we're calling it my list box here, right? Yeah, so it's my list box. We'll just insert maybe that there was an error on that end right there. So we'll say, we'll come back up here. Under our else block, we'll say my list box dot insert 0, and then we'll say at the beginning, so 0, error processing message ... Okay, awesome. One last thing we could maybe do really quickly here is we are calling, I think we're calling, if we scroll up on our client, we are, all right, we're receiving, we're processing the message. So then when we process the message, we are trying to create a new message packet, right? So when we get the info flag, we're trying to create a message packet to send back to the server. So let's just quickly write that create message function on the client side now. So here is create message, and this is, again, it's just we're gonna create a new dictionary, so we'll call it message packet. It's just gonna format this for us. So here is our dictionary. The key will be flag with an associated value of whatever flag we pass in. The key will be name with an associated value of whatever name we pass in. The key will be message with an associated value of whatever message we pass in. And the key will be color with whatever associated value of color that we pass in. And so here we have to return the message packet. So now, I think this is going to work better now. So now that when we call create message and we pass in that information, we'll get a message packet back. Okay, I actually think we're at a really great point where we might be able to test some of this to see if we get any, visual feedback coming in. So let's run this. Let's run our server. All right, so I'm going to run my server. I'm going to run my client. All right, so there's my client. There's my server. I'm going to start my server. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Server started. And now let's do some work here on the client side. So I'll put my name in, Mike. My host IP, my local IP is 192.168.1.7. Yours is going to be different. Could be different. And then my port address is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't know, I'll pick a color of red. And I'll click connect. And let's see what happens. Okay, awesome. So it looks like when we connect, so right, I clicked the connect button. That means I sent some information to the server. The server accepted the connection. It sent a message packet to my client with an info flag. We got the info flag and it said, hey, you want some information from us? We're going to send you this back. And then it looks like the server is processing that. So we got our name, Mike, and my IP address of 192.168.1.7. So, and that's being added to our list box nicely. So our client looks like the GUI is updating, and that's wonderful. I'd love to see some visual feedback here on the client side, though, that we did in fact connect. We said that in our server, when we make a new connection, we should be broadcasting to all clients about that connection. And we didn't really get that message over here. But we did. We actually did get it. We just haven't yet written how to process that message yet. So if you look here, when we come to our server, under connect client, when the client connects, we are broadcasting. Where are we doing this? So let's see. While true. So in our client script, when we process a message in our process message function, we can see that if it is an info flag, we officially start our connection. And here at the end of this, when we officially start our connection, we are starting our receive thread by targeting the receive message function. So once we've officially made a connection, our client should be able to receive messages from the server at all times. So let's go write this receive message function right now. So I'm going to scroll down, and here is our receive message function. Now, we want this thread to continuously run through the scope of the program, so we'll use an infinite while loop. So we'll say while true. And now inside of here, we'll just put a comment. We'll say receive an incoming message packet. I'll spell it right. Packet from the server. Okay, so we'll use a try and except block to handle some errors here. So we'll say try, and the first thing that we'll do is we'll try to receive data from the server as a JSON. We'll say receive an incoming message packet. Okay, so we'll say message JSON is equal to, we have to access our client socket. We're going to do it through the connection object that we've passed in. So connection.client_socket. And then we'll call the .receive method. And here we'll pass in our byte size, which we'll access through our connection object. So connection.byte size. All right, awesome. Now that we have this message JSON, what do we got to do with it? Well, we've just received a message, so we should probably process that message. So we'll call the process message function, and we'll pass in our connection object and the message JSON that we just received. So we'll come back down here to receive message, and we'll now call process message, and we'll pass in our connection object and the message JSON that we just received. Okay, awesome. The except block, which will just handle some any errors if they pop up. So we'll say except. What do we want to do? So we'll say, oh, what just happened there? My cursor jumped. So we'll say cannot receive message, close the connection, and break. So then we'll break out of this infinite while loop if an error occurs. So we'll say here we'll give some visual feedback by putting something in our client's list box. So we'll say my list box dot insert at index 0 right at the top. We'll say connection. There we go. I spelled that wrong. Connection. There we go. Has been closed. ... Goodbye. All right, that looks great. And so then we'll just simply break out of our while loop, and that will end the receive message thread. So that will no longer be working here. Okay, so if we look inside our receive message function, we're calling process message again. So let's go back up to process message now, and let's continue to add to some of its functionality. Because I believe right now, if we scroll up, all we've done is we've told this function how to process a message if the flag is our info flag, which is really only going to be sent right at the startup of our connecting to the server. So now let's talk about how we might process whether or not we are going to, or when we get a message flag or maybe a disconnect flag. So we'll do the message flag first. So if we get a message flag, then the server has essentially sent us a message from maybe another client connected to it, and we need to display it. So what we'll do is we'll insert it into our list box. So we'll say server has sent a message, so display it. All right, so we'll say my list box.insert, and we'll insert it right at the beginning. So index 0, and I'll use an F string here, and we'll specify the name. And so the name here, if we think about it, what's name? Well, inside this function, name is coming from the message packet. And so every single client, or really even our server, if our admin is sending something, is putting in their own specific name. So that we'll display it here in our chat. So we'll say name, and then I'll do a colon, and then I'll say message, and we'll display that individual message. And then What we should also do is that message, if we run it right now, all we're doing is inserting the specific message. But we want to now format that message to be a specific color, the chosen color that the client has selected. And that color is right here. We've defined it. We got it from the message packet. So we can configure that list box entry. So we're going to do my list box dot item config. So we'll configure that individual item, and we'll say at index 0. So which item? Well, the index right at the top, which is the thing we just put at the top, and then we'll configure the foreground attribute, and we'll set the color of the text to be whatever color came in with our message packet. All right, so I think this should work pretty good. So now if we actually run this, we should see some information coming in from the server, because we know we were sending a broadcast message to all of the clients when a client joined. So if we start our server 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I start, and we'll do Mike at 192.168.1.7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I connect, look at that. So now we are getting that broadcast. It says, from the admin as a broadcast, Mike joined the server. And really, if I run another client, so now I've got multiple clients open. Let's join have another client join here. We'll say Bob 192.168.1.7, and if we connect, we get that as well, right? So it gets popped right up here. So this is working really quite nicely. So we're sending our message packets, and we're processing those message packets really nicely depending on what the flags are. We'll worry about the disconnect flag here in a little bit, maybe coming up in the future. But for right now, our clients can join the server. So let's work on the client's ability to actually send information to the server. So, sending like a message so that the server can broadcast it to everybody. So I'm going to scroll down, and let's work on the send message function here. So inside of our send message function, we'll just say we want to, we'll send the message to the server. So we're going to create a message packet first, and we have a function that does this. So we'll call message packet, and we'll call it message packet, and we'll call our create message function. And so now what message do we want to send here? So we need a flag. We'll put our message flag. And now we need to get a name. So names first, right? So if we look at our create message packet, we need a flag, a name, a message, and a color. So if we come back down here to send message, our flag is going to be message. Now what's our name going to be? Well, our name is going to be whatever we put into our entry box. And I'll scroll up here. If you look, when we called our connect function and we made our connection object has an attribute of name, and that's right there, right? We got it from our entry field, and we've got an attribute called color that we got from our entry field. So we're going to use those as a lot of our arguments here. Here we are in our send message function. So our flag is message. Our name we're going to get through our connection object, so connection.name. Our message is the next thing. We're going to get our message from our input entry. So if you remember, we have an entry box called input entry where the client can type in their message. We're just going to get the message right from that box whenever we want to send a message. So we'll say input entry.get. And then we need the color of the message, and the color will come from our connection object. We've stored it there, so connection.color. All right, awesome. Now that we have that message packet, that's a dictionary, so if we want to send it, we have to make sure we can encode it, so we'll turn it into a string first using JSON. So we'll say message underscore JSON is equal to json.dumps, and inside of here we'll pass the message packet that we just created. And now that we have that, we can send it through our data stream, through our socket, and we'll access the socket through our connection object. So we'll say connection.client socket, dot send, and what do we want to send? We want to send our message JSON, and this is encodable. We can encode it because it's a string, so we'll say dot encode, and the encoder will access the encoder through our connection object, so connection dot encoder. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. One of the last things we'll do here is once we type in, and I'll just run the client so we can see the layout here. Once we type in our message, hey, what's up, and I click send, I want to send that message, and then I'm going to clear out this this entry form so that I don't have to manually delete it. So we'll say clear the input entry, and so we'll say input entry dot delete. We'll start at the beginning at index 0, and we'll go all the way to the end, however far that is. Now, we want to be able to send this message anytime we hit our send button. So we have to link the send button to this function, the send message function. And I think it might already be. Let's go take a look, though. Let's just verify. So where's my send button? Info frame. Output frame, input frame. So here's my send button. Sorry, that took me a little while. And if I scroll over, we are currently linked via the command attribute to send message, but that was from our old model. We have to update this now to take in a parameter, right? We want to send in our connection object. So we're going to use a lambda to do that. So I'm going to update this to say command equals lambda colon send message, and now inside of here I can pass my connection. That is our connection object that I will pass in. Where did that connection object come from? Remember, we created the connection object right here. So outside of all of those functions, we're referring to it as my connection, but inside of all of the functions, we're just referencing it as an arbitrary, I think, connection object. Okay, I think that that's going to work out quite nicely. Okay, so now that the client is prepared to send messages to the server with message flags in the message packet, we should go over to the server and sort of tell the server how to process these types of flags. So if I come over to our server, and I'm going to be in my process message function, we've already processed the info flags, so now we should probably process our message flags. So I'm going to scroll down, and if we get a message packet and the flag of that message packet is message, well, then we want to do something a little bit differently. So what do we want to do here? The first thing that we're going to do is we've got a message, so let's broadcast the given message. So we'll say broadcast the given message. Right, a client has sent a message in, and so we are going to send that message out to everyone. So let's say broadcast message, and inside of here, let's just verify if we check my broadcast message function, we need a connection and we need a message JSON. All right, not a problem. We've got a connection, and I think we have a message JSON, right? We are taking in a message JSON right here, so we're just going to forward it right along. Message JSON. Awesome. So next, what will we do? Well, let's update the server's UI. So we'll say update the server UI, and we'll insert our message into our kind of like chat history. So we'll say we were calling this list box history list box here on the server end. And so we'll say insert at index 0. We'll do as an F string here. We'll put the name of whatever came in on the message packet. So name, colon, and then the message of whatever came in on the message packet. And then similarly, I want to format this this item in the list box to have the right color. So whatever the color was that came in on the message packet, we'll use that here. So we'll say lit history list box dot item config. Which item? Item 0, the item we just added to the list box. And then we'll set the foreground attribute to be the color of whatever we've sent in here. Okay, perfect. So now I think let's give this a shot. Let's give this a shot. And I think right here, right, so we're sending the message JSON to our broadcast function. And I think we said all JSONs are to be encoded when they are being sent to the broadcast function. But there's no need to encode this here because it's already encoded. We never actually decoded it in this function using the loads method. See, we have message packet. That's the thing that has been decoded. So message JSON should still be encoded. So if we run this, we should be able to test this, and we have our ability to, I think, actually have a chat. So let's check this out. So we'll run the server. I'll run a couple of instances of the client. And let's test this out. All right. So server, client, and where's my other client? Client. Okay. So we'll start the server on 12345. Start server. Mike 192.168.1.7 at port 12345. I'll pick a color of red. All right, Mike has joined. That looks great. And then we'll do Bob at 192.168.1.7 at port 12345. And I'll do a color of blue. Connect. Okay, so let's test this out. Hey, what's up? And I'm going to send this, and hopefully we'll get that. And it did not go through. It did not go through. So let's try to figure out why here. So I'm going to pause the video and try to debug this, and I'll be right back. Okay, I figured out what we did wrong. I I skipped a very important part, which is kind of funny. Maybe you've realized what happened here. So let's walk through what's going on. So I'm on the server script right here, and if you look, when I process a message, okay, we try to connect to the server. We know that the server is going to accept a connection. They will send an info flag to the client. The client gets the info flag and sends an info flag back to the server. Now, right in here, when we get the info flag, we add the client. It's a secure connection. We broadcast to everybody that the client has joined, and then we update our UI. And that has been working. And then we said, okay, well, now we can send some message flags, message packets with message flags, and we kind of wrote that functionality out. But what we didn't do is once we accept the client and that it's been connected through our info flag, we have this receive thread. And so we start a thread on the server side to constantly listen for incoming messages from that specific client. So like when I run my client and I type in a message and I hit send, the server should be listening for that incoming message in the receive message function that's this thread. And I don't think we ever wrote that function. Yeah, we didn't. So we left that blank. So that was my mistake here. So let's think about what this receive message function needs to be. So it's going to receive, messages from our client at any time. So when it's running in a thread, and we want that thread to run forever. So I'll say while true. Okay, so now we'll say here, get a message JSON from a client. And so we'll use try and accept block. So we'll say try, and we'll get a message JSON. So they're sending one in. So we'll say client. I have my client socket right here. Okay, so we're accessing the client socket. This individual client socket that the thread is running on, dot receive. And now I need to specify the byte size. The byte size will be stored in my connection object, so connection.bytesize. And once I have gotten that message, once that message comes in, now I need to process it. And so we were missing that part, right? When I typed in a message and I hit send, we didn't have this part to receive it. Now we will, and once we get that message, now we'll call process message, and we'll pass in our required information. So let's just go look at the process message function and look at what's required. So I need a connection object, I got one. I need a message JSON, I got one. I need a client socket, I got one. And then here I don't have a client address, right? I don't have their IP address, but I don't need one. We said that we only really need the client IP address if our flag is an info flag, so we can add that IP to our connections IP list. And I don't have to worry about it. And that's why I have a default value here as a tuple of 0, 0. So I don't have to pass that in. It'll just take that 0, 0, and we should be all set. So let's come down here and put in our appropriate arguments here. So I'm going to pass in my connection that I have right here. I'm going to pass in my message JSON, which I just got right here. And then I will pass in my client socket, which I have right here. All right, perfect. And then we'll just say accept, and we'll just break the this while loop, which will end our thread for us. Okay, so now, because we've added this receive message functionality, now I think everything should work. So let's test this out. So I'll run my server. I'm going to run a couple of instances of my client. So there's 1, there's 2. All right, we'll space these out a bit. So client, client, and let's bring our server in. All right, there's my server. I'll start the server on port 12345. So the server is active. Let's join the server. So Mike 192.168.1.7 at port 12345. I'll pick a color of red. We're going to connect. All right, that looks good. We'll connect Bob at 192.168.1.7 at port 12345. We'll pick blue. We'll connect. All right, so everybody's connecting. The information's showing up here nicely. Let's go in and try to send a message. Hey, Bob, what's up? So I'll hit send, and it looks like it is finally working. So that's great. And so the color looks great. We've set it to red. The chat history over on the server is updating. We're getting the information that we need here. So then Bob will respond, will say, nothing much. What's up with you? And hopefully this will be a different color. It should be blue when I send this. And there we have it. It's looking nice and blue. Really, really cool. So a few things that we still got to do. The chat is working, and it's working really nicely, but we've got all of this admin functionality where we should be able to maybe send a message as an admin, private message, kick and ban, and do all that stuff. And then we've got our disconnect button that we still need to kind of set up here on the client side. So I think this is a good place to stop here. We really are getting a nice working chat application. In the next couple of videos, we will wrap this up, and I will see you then.